Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by. I am back with another video for the Stamp of Approval Winterhaven blog hop. If you haven't heard of the Stamp of Approval, this is an exclusive collection of crafty goodness that is designed specifically for each collection. They are all brand new products and they won't be available in the Catherine Pooler Design store for many months. And I will have more details and links over on my blog about that. In the meantime, let's check out what we're going to be using for today's card. I'm starting with the Joy Wreath. This is part of the Winterhaven collection. And then I'm also going to be using the ornamental background. The card that I'm sharing with you today is so incredibly easy. In fact, I accidentally deleted some of the footage out of this, and you're still going to be able to see how I did this. I just love it. This background stamp, I had so much fun using it, and I could think of so many different things that you could do with it. What I did was super simple, but you could step it up a notch and do tons with it. It's definitely a bonus for your stash. Now I'm starting with Neenah Solar White cardstock. I have just a couple of marks there that I had put on there with a light pencil, and I'm going to mask the top portion of this off with some 3M Post-it labeling tape. This is 2-inch tape. You could certainly mask this off with whatever you have on hand. I prefer this type of tape. It's nice and wide. It gives me a lot of space to do a lot of ink blending and stamping. Plus I use this a lot in masking when I mask off stamp for scene cards. So I'm just getting this lined up here. I need this as straight as I can possibly get it, and you're going to see why here in a moment. I am also going to take some Catherine Pooler ink. This is Aquatini. Now my Inkpad is nice and juicy because I just re-inked it, and I re-inked it on purpose. I wanted it to have as much ink in it as I could because of this. I'm just lightly tapping it onto my paper. There's so much ink, it's automatically soaking right in. But I am going to take a Ranger mini blending tool and foam, and I'm going to blend that in even more. I want to really work that into the fibers of the paper. So when I move on to my next step, I can make sure that this part of my card is nice and saturated with ink. It will make a big difference on the next step. So I'm just making sure it's all worked in there. And then I'm actually going to set this panel off to the side to dry for a little bit. You could totally set it with a heat tool, but I had other things to work on, so I just let it air dry for quite a while. I'm going to pull off the masking tape here, and my line isn't super crisp, but that's fine. It was more important to me that it was straight as opposed to crisp, because I can actually add a little bit of detail later, and then you won't even notice that line wasn't all that crisp. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Joy Wreath die and some Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I'm just adding some marks around this part of the die. Now I could cut that Joy piece out of there, but I don't want to do that because in the future I want to be able to use this all in one piece. It's so much easier that way. But I needed to make sure that I had an area marked off so I know exactly where I need to color that, because I want this to have like an ombre effect in reds. So I'm just taking my Copic colors, and I'm starting with the R39 at the bottom of where the letters would be. And I'm adding a little bit of that, and then I'm going to go in with an R27, go over the top of that, and then I'm going to bring it up just a little bit higher. I'm not terribly concerned with blending at the moment. I didn't record it all, but I actually go over this a couple times until I get the blend that I want. And then the other thing to keep in mind is Copics blend a lot better when they have something porous underneath them. I'm not certain what the reason behind that is, but it does make a difference. I didn't do that because it wasn't super important on this particular die cut, but it's always something to keep in mind when you're coloring. Now I'm finishing this off with R22, and then again I go back over this until I get the blend that I want, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to accomplish here. Actually, I take that back. I actually do show you where I go over this again. I'm just doing flicking motions at this point, and then I go through all of my colors again, and I don't think I mentioned all of those. It was R39, R27, R24, and I finish it off with R22. And that seems to work out really well. These are probably my favorite red combination for Christmas colors. I actually use this quite a bit when I need a good solid red, but for Christmas, these reds are perfect. They feel like, to me, like the perfect traditional Christmas red. So I like to use these a lot during the holidays, but they can certainly be used any time of the year, anytime you need a good red for Copic coloring. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of the Stick It adhesive to this entire piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I'm going to die cut that out with that wreath and the joy in the middle of it. You could use a liquid adhesive to adhere all of these together, but I just felt that this would be easier in the long run, because what I want to do is I want to stack up the wreath and the joy 3 times, so it gives the front of the cards a little bit of dimension, because for all intents and purposes this is kind of a 1-layer card, but I wanted to add just a tiny bit of a dimension, and I didn't want to deal with foam tape or anything like that, so I thought I would do this. Really, at the end of the day, it was probably a little bit more work than what was necessary. I should have just die cut them out, stacked them one on top of each other, and used liquid adhesive. Tombow Mono multi-glue would be great. Glossy accents, anything you have, that would be easy, and it would still work just as fine. So now I'm going to start getting this die cut out. Now I'm showing you this because here's what I did. I cut the first wreath right side up, like I was supposed to, just like that. And then when I cut the second and third wreath, I flipped the paper upside down so my adhesive was backwards, which was no bueno. So I actually really wasted more time than what was necessary. Don't do that. Be smarter than me. All right, so now my panel is dry, and I did end up taking a heat tool to it for just a moment because I needed to make sure that it was completely dry, because I'm going to add some VersaMark ink to the ornamental background stamp, and I'm going to add it to the entire panel. Now, my VersaMark Inkpad is super sticky. I over ink my ink pads, my VersaMark ink pads. I can't talk, I apologize. I over ink my VersaMark ink pads all the time because I like how they react with inks. And also then I make sure that I get a really good first impression the first time, which is super important when you're heat embossing. So now I just flip my card panel over on top of that background stamp, and then I had a piece of paper towel there, and I'm making sure that I'm rubbing it in really well because I want this to cover the whole entire front of the panel. Now you're going to see how the VersaMark ink reacts with that Aquatini ink, but also over the top of that white portion of the card panel, you're going to be able to see that. It's fairly subtle, but it's just enough that it adds a really cool effect, especially since the top of it has all the inking and the bottom of it is just pure white. It is gorgeous. I'm actually super in love with this background stamp. Look at that. Now, the VersaMark ink is still wet at the moment, so it looks darker yet. It will dry back a little bit, and you can see that in the finished photos, but not by much. It still looks like I had used 2 different colors of inks on my card panel. Now at this point, you could either heat set it or just leave it to air dry. I left it to air dry because I had other things again that I could work on, and now you can see that it's dried back just a tiny bit, but now you can also see the detail of that VersaMark ink on that white portion of the card panel compared to how it looks on the top portion with the inking. I just love that. It's awesome. So here is the other thing. I lost the footage on the coloring I did on the very top wreath. And I'll show you here in just a moment, and I'll explain to you what I did. It was more Copic coloring. It was super easy. You can totally see what I did. And you could use so many different things. You could do a little bit of watercoloring on this, like a really dry watercoloring. If you use Neenah, you could use watercolor paper and do a more wet type of watercolor on it. You could use colored pencils. You could use gel pens. You could even cut this wreath out with glitter paper and call it a day. and not have to worry about it. You could even take those leaves and the berries and cut those out in glitter paper, trim them out, and then attach them to the top of a white piece of die cut, and that would look super awesome. As it is, I'm moving forward. I put a little bit of Tombow Mono multi-glue on the back of this. I have all 3 of them stacked together already, and I'm just going to place this just about in the center of where the Aquatini is and where the white is. And I love the contrast of that deep teal color with the red and the green. I love it. It's my favorite. So I just took the same reds that I'd done for the joy on the berries and colored the berries in. I used 3 different colors of Copics on that. You don't need to. You could just color them in red, and you'd have yourself some little red berries with 1 color, and that would be good. I also added a little bit of detail to the leaves. Again, you wouldn't need to do that. Just make them green, and they would be pretty. And then I'm just kind of eyeballing where I have the joy there, and I'm going to attach that here in a moment. Now I do have some of the stick-it adhesive on the very bottom layer of this, and that's what I'm going to use to attach it to my card panel. Now the thing that you need to keep in mind with stick-it adhesive is it won't really stick until you actually press it down firmly, and that's what I did. I made sure that I had it where I wanted, and then I pushed it down real firmly. And then the last 2 things I did was I took some Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen and went over the joy and the berries. And then I also took some of this Nouveau crystal drops. This is the clear, and I went over the top of the joy so it's nice and glossy. Something to keep in mind with that is if you put too much of the Nouveau crystal drops on, it will crack as it dries. So just enough of a layer that you get the idea that it's nice and glossy, but not too much so you don't see any cracking. All right, that's it. Be sure to head over to my blog for more details and links, as well as check out the other video I have to share for the blog hop and everybody else's. They're all fabulous. I also want to let you know that there is a blog hop prize. One winner will be chosen at random from each day's comments and announced on October 11th on Catherine's blog. The winner will win their box, and if they already bought it, they will be issued a gift certificate worth $100 towards a future purchase. Also, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I sure hope you liked my card today. Thanks so much for stopping by. Until next time.